Appleton. In fact, they first moved into to see all the new things that had been birthed and pet the new calves. And it was just a great delight for Mrs. Sim and for all the little people. This is on the back on the right is the Dowdles bringing in the hay from behind their house. And no doubt they were clearing it off because there was going to be a ball diamond there shortly after. The tiny little person in the front part is Faye Dowdle, and her father is up on top of the hay, and her grandpa, Pappy Dowdle, who delivered the mail, is on the front part. So great memories and hard workers. We had a family move to Appleton. In fact, they first moved into the little log place that Mr. Gilmore had built. It was Jonathan and Joyce Robinson. And when Joyce came to Appleton, she was just a new bride and very young, very shy, and very lonesome. And she came from a little village called Makovic on the shores of Labrador. And she was so lonesome at Christmas time for family that her husband, Jonathan, any friends that Joyce had befriended during the summer, Jonathan invited them to come on Christmas Eve, and we reenacted what took place in the little village of Makovic where Joyce lived. So there was a captain of a ship, and he used to bring the last load of fruit up the coastline to Makovic, and it would come in August before freeze up, and it was all the fresh fruits and vegetables for the winter, and the apples or oranges were kept for Christmas Eve. So on Christmas Eve at Joyce and Jonathan's house, we gathered and did the very same thing as they did. In Makovic, they all went to the little church, and they all had an apple with a candle in it, and that was the only light in the church. And they sang Christmas carols and had prayers and had a beautiful Christmas Eve. So every Christmas Eve since Joyce and Jonathan have been here, we do the very same thing. And Jonathan tells us a story about the fruit making its way up to Makovic, and Jonathan tells that story with a tear in his eye, and Joyce brings out the trays of oranges or apples with the candles all lit. The lights are turned out. We all sing Silent Night, and Jonathan will often reminisce about who isn't with us this past year, and he welcomes everyone. And if you've been invited once to this Christmas Eve party, you're there for life. And this is our first year. We're not going to be able to do it. But can I point out anybody? Yeah. Okay. This would be Jonathan's father and Ernie Craig, Jonathan's mother, Dylan Holmes, and Paul Craig and his wife, and Cody and Denise and Jessica and Amanda Brown and their mom Vivian. And this is Riley Craig, and this is, I know, Hamish. And they're all children from the village with their parents. And we used to be it started out with maybe 8 people, and it's now up to about 50 or 60. So, and it means so much to every one of us. It's a really special time in our lives, and especially when we know how happy we made Joyce. And this is our friend Johnny Bolton. He was a real prize of a man. He lived across the bridge and up the hill on the top of the hill. And he was a Scottish man and very Scottish by nature. He had a beautiful, beautiful apple orchard, of which he did not like to share one apple. And I could remember my brother coming home with a big sweater full of lumps and bumps. And Johnny was visiting my mother at the time, and he said, "My goodness, that boy has a big swelling." And my mother said, "Yes, enough to make an apple pie." And Johnny was a man before his time. He always rode his bicycle and it had a sidecart on it. He would go into Carleton Place. His bagpipes would be in the sidecart, and he would walk up and down in front of the Queen's Hotel every Saturday, and he'd play his bagpipes. And he also never had a car, never learned to drive, but he built a garage and bought a car. And the only time the car ever got moved was on Halloween night, when someone backed it out and took it down the hill. And then Johnny had to find someone in the morning to bring it back up. But he, I can remember the day that we were told the war was over. And we had crepe paper on all the windows and whatnot at school. And we came down, and the boys put that all on their bicycles. And we came down, and Johnny had his bagpipes, and we had pots and pans, and we'd be banging our pots and pans and having our own parade, and led by Johnny. And he really thought he was King Tut. He, in later years, when he became fragile and feeble, he befriended my mother. He was very fond of my mother, and we lived next door. And he said to my mother, "I'm not able to look after myself. If I give you my house, would you take care of me?" Well, the house had no water nor hydro, just like the one we lived in. But my mother had 4 children, and that was going to be a real treat. Anyhow, we moved into Johnny's house, and we helped take care of him. There was times I think he wondered what he'd gotten into, especially at birthday cake time. I can remember my mother made a cake for my oldest brother, and she knew Johnny wasn't used to having things in the birthday cake. And my brother took his piece over to show to Johnny, and Johnny just grabbed it and ate it. Then he got this great big button. He said, "You're just trying to kill me." Oh dear, poor man. Hey, this is Johnny's house on the left, and out front is my baby sister, Honey, nicknamed Honey, Helen, Faye Dowdle, and Lorna. And this picture on the right is when we had moved into that house, and that was the orchard, and in between the trees was a big plot of rhubarb, and there were green gage trees, and it was just a great place for us to grow up. And off in one corner on the right was a little log barn, and during wartime we kept a cow. And when the cow was going to have her calf, we had to get milk from Langtry's Dairy. And oh, the milkman was so handsome. And we just hoped that cow kept that calf for ages. And yeah, it was just great memories. Okay, this is partly where we swam in front of the church, and the picture on the right. It's my sister Lorna and my little brother Tony, and Lorna's first husband Frank, and her nibs in the rubber hat. And it was a great place to swim. You had to be careful because there was an undercurrent a few feet out, and you could go over the spillway if you weren't careful. And if my mother had ever known half the things we did with that little boy, we would take him over to the dam in his diaper and get him out on a diving board. And my biggest brother, Lloyd, would be down in the water, and we'd throw Tony in, and he'd go down and come up and say, again, again. Anyhow, my mother had no loss of putting him to sleep that night, any nights, because we had him wore out. These pictures on the left of the dam, we used to go across the dam from the side of Miss Stewart's, walk across and get where the stop logs were. And if the stop logs were raising up the water, it would give you a great flow and just like a big shower. And we used to be able to crawl in behind those little pillars and stand in there and get the water pounding down on your shoulders and your back. And we'd be there with our big bottle of Watkins hair shampoo. And you certainly were well rinsed when you came out. It was just delightful. The picture on the bottom, the dam extends to the left and led to another little bridge. But on the extension, we were all lined up one day playing, and a little girl fell in. And the part where she fell in was a sluice, and it was all full of garbage and moss and anything that floated down the river. And the little girl, Linda Green, she didn't know how to swim, and she was thrashing around. And one girl that did know how to swim and had all kinds of medals didn't jump in. I jumped in and got her and said to her, I can't believe I had all that common sense, and please don't splash, please don't kick, and I will pull you to the ladder. And so we did, we got to the ladder. It was wooden, and with the weight of two of us, the odd step would keep breaking, but they hauled us up, and we took Linda home to my mother, who scrubbed her all up and did her hair back in ringlets and washed her clothes and did her up, and just had her going just the way she came to the village. Anyhow, the following pay week, her father came to me. I was the nanny at Jim and Jean Colley's for the summer. And this is Leo Kennedy on the right, and Leo, Linda's father, and Linda on the left. Leo had been to Moscovich's and bought me the most beautiful full skirt and an eyelet blouse. And they no more could afford that than we could, because they had a family of boys plus Linda. And they were, well, we made them so happy, but we just couldn't believe they were so kind to us. But anyhow, and at the end of the war, there was a big parade in Carleton Place, and Leo Kennedy was on the float, and he coming down Main Street. I can remember he spotted me and waved, and I really thought I was the queen because somebody knew me, and he was wearing a uniform. But little did I know how much he really came to mean to me, because such a treat as I got. In both pictures, On the left picture, the one in the uniform is Lenny Spinks. And on the right picture, the one on the very right is Lawrence Spinks. They were both in the war, and Lawrence saw a lot of war. He was really in the bombing part. And they were very good people for the village. Lenny was a real community-minded person. He taught Sunday school at the little church. And I'll have to tell you that he said to one of the parents, I have to tell you about your son. He said, I was teaching Sunday school today and that telling them that God's your father and he looks after you. And little Sonny Dunn stood up and said, God might be your father, but Everett Dunn is mine. And Lenny said, what do you say? The picture with Lawrence Spinks in it. They are sitting on the ruins of the old hotel, which was in front of the store. And back behind is a little wooden sidewalk that went right up past our house, up past Johnny's house, right up to the top of the hill. And the only thing I can really remember about my sister Lorna is she came down that hill, and years ago we wore a little thing called a waist that it was buttoned up the front, and we had suspenders on the front and back, especially on the front, to hold up our stockings. And she had on rubber boots, and she came down to go to the store to get candy, and our dog came with her, and he stood in front of her and he wouldn't let her cross, and my mother caught up with her. But that's my biggest memory of my sister Lorna. Back behind these men were the Gilmore Cottages. There were two. One was a stucco and the other was a little log one behind. And the Gilmore family, this is where they spent a lot of their summers and just had great times. And they were very active in the village. And this is our famous store. I can remember Mrs. Lyons in the bottom right. She delivered babies and delivered mail. She was our postmistress and very firm about when the mail was being sorted. We had to stay very quiet. She didn't want any mistakes. And after the war, some of these bottom pictures are taken by Malik Karsh, who came and spent a week at Appleton. And Mrs. Lyons would be behind that post office sign, and she had a door that she'd bang down, and there was to be no noise while she stamped all the mail. And I can remember when my sister Honey, or Helen, was about to be born. We didn't know there was a baby coming. My mother said, go tell Mrs. Lyons that I need her. So I went up to that door and banged on it. And she up with that door. What would you like? I said, my mom said to tell you that she needs you. Tell your mom I'll be there just as soon as I can. And by the time I got home, Mrs. Lyons was upstairs at my house. And we answered the door to the rap, and there came Dr. Kelly. And we said, how did you know my mother was sick? I just knew. And we said, well, she's upstairs with Mrs. Lyons. And he said, well, I have something for her. What would it be? Well, it could be a puppy, you never know. So first thing we heard was a noise upstairs, a crying. Up my brother and I went, Lloyd, and there we saw Honey laying on the bed, wailing her head off. And in later years, we'd tell Honey that we saw her laying on the bed with no clothes on. And she'd say, Mommy, I did come with an undershirt, didn't I? Oh, she was so very proud. The Lions have sold everything you could imagine. There was posts in the store that had the fruit and vegetables, and there was rubber boots on the shelves. There was coveralls on the shelves, coveralls hanging from the poles, baskets of turnips hanging from the poles, and just a great variety of everything. And Mr. McGregor, who used to own the store, lived across the corner. And he would say to me, I would did chores for them at night. And he would say, go to the store. I want 2 sweet oranges. And I would like 2 fresh muffins. And I thought, how do I know if the oranges are sweet? Anyhow, then I would return and he'd say, now I need a pail of water. And the pumps were very few then. And I would take his pail. And on good nights, I would go down towards the hall. There was a pump at Ferguson's house. And I would get his water and bring it back. And if it was a really cold night, I would go onto that lot below Gilmore's cottage and I'd get a pail. And he would say, did you get this from the deep well? Oh, yes. Are you sure? No, not quite. And anyhow, I'd have to dump it out and go back and get the other one. The pail down below wasn't from a deep drilled well. I found that out. Anyhow, and Mr. McGregor was a very different old fellow too, a nice old man, dreadfully afraid of the cold. Only answered his door after he put a big muffler on and a big hat and a coat, and then he'd peek out and, how can I help you? And I say, well, I came here to help you. And he always had that on. He always bundled up. And I would, one of my chores was to get 2 scuttles of coal and take them down their steps to his stove down there, and bring in a couple of armloads of kindling and fill his wood box. And that was my nightly chore. But it was good memories. Okay, the picture on the top right is of our latest reunion, which was just a couple of years ago. And a lot of these children grew up in the village, and they've all remained friends. And our reunion was just a great thrill to have everybody come back and reminisce. The picture on the bottom left is a reunion of 1980, and we are older in this one, but there's still a lot of the same people came, but our group was getting smaller, and that was our little red schoolhouse with our outhouse with the moon and knotholes that got peeked through. And this was a school that we did attend. And when I was going, there was only one room, the room on the right-hand side. A couple of years later, it became a 2-room school, and had been, I guess, a 2-room school many years prior. But I only ever was in the one, and a lot of those people that attended there are still my really good friends. This is in front of our school, and our teacher is Mrs. Cox. And my friend Marion Timmons. And I know today we have Donnie Scott watching us from Kingston. And Eleanor, my brother Lloyd. I forgot to tell you about his trick. He used to go to Miss Stewart, and she always had a little garden behind her house. And he would pick cucumbers and then go to her front door, and he would say, Miss Stewart, these are fresh off the vine and they're only 10 cents. Oh, she said, I'll take them all. And he would get his money and off he'd go. Oh, that was just one of his many tricks. This is my sister Lorna. It's so sad to look at these and see how many are not with us anymore. But we had great memories of all these kids, and they all turned out to be really good kids. Except that guy, he was a ripper. Okay. I really wanted just to say about this one that this is John Edwards and this is Hank Colley. And John, when we were young and at the school, when school was over, we could go down the road to the cheese factory, and John and his father had the curds all brought to one end of the vat, and they'd be freshly salted. We could hang over the vat and help ourselves. And oh, that was the biggest treat of our day. It was just a wonderful memory.
Do you want to talk about the banners?
Okay, up in the window of the door, you'll see all the streamers. That is what we took off all the windows and the boys put on their bicycles, wrapped them through their spokes and whatnot when we had our parade after the war. This is Sneddon Drive as of today, and it didn't exist way back then, but Herbie would have been so proud of all the lovely homes and families that came there. And I had one little girl ask me, Nanny, when you were a little girl, was that river there? And I said, yes, it was. Oh, it didn't just come after. I said, no, it was always there. But Nanny, what about all these other houses here? Were you happy that they came? I said, oh, the day the machinery came, my heart was broken. And she said, really? And I said, Jessica, I said, they took away all our cedar hedge. I said, they made a road. They took away all our buttercups, all our milkweed, everything we played in. I said, we were just devastated. And I said, but you know what? 2 years later, when we were outside, and we'd be thinking, all I hear are children laughing, far nicer than buttercups and milkweed. I said, I was truly delighted that you people all came here. And I said, and I have never changed. This was a second blacksmith shop that was built in Appleton. Mr. Gladish had the first one up on the far side of the store. And in later years, after the war, his son Max and Jack and Mr. Gladish built this one. And they had 2 apartments on the top. And he did all his blacksmith welding, and the horses all came in there for their new shoes. And in a few years later, very few, our post office moved up into one end of that building as well. And it has now become a private home. And Mr. Gladish was very good. I don't know about all the children, but I know we always had a dog, and he would let me go in and sit on a block of wood, and I could watch him doing the shoes on the horse, and he'd carve and carve. And he said, "Now, this is for your dog. It's very, very nourishing." He said, "Now, make sure your dog gets it." And I would go home with a little container of peelings off a hoof and really thought I was in heaven. Master Gladish gave me a treat for the dog. So anyhow, in later years, we had two doctors move in there, Dr. Fernandez and Dr. Marion. And they had a little boy and little girl. And I used to mind Noah the boy. And Christine Fernandez said to me one day, "Eleanor," she said, "I have an apple tree." She said, I want you to come and help yourself." She said, "And take all the apples you want for your apple jelly." And so I did, and made my apple jelly. And then I thought, I'll treat her. So I put my little jar of apple jelly in a tiny little yellow bag and took it into the medical center. And I said to her nurse, "Please give this to Christina and tell her it's from Eleanor." Well, Christina didn't open it for quite a while because she thought it was a urine sample. We have giggled about it ever after. She couldn't believe getting a urine sample in a pretty little gift bag. Okay. Down on the right-hand corner is our cheese factory, and the wagons, or the farmers that brought all their milk and cream, they put it in here, came in there, and it was taken into the factory. And if you wanted later, there was around the back another big pipe that gave you whey. And I know we used to go get whey and in a barrel, and that's what we put in the hash for our pigs. And this is Everett Dunn, and this is Cecil Dunn, and they are identical twins. And they had great voices, and Mr. Everett rented out boats, and with the children in the village, he put names on the boats, and the kids thought that was great if your boat was called Anne or Bill or whatever. And he let you use the boats as long as they weren't going to be out for hire. And he was very good about sharing those with us. And this building up here belongs to Michael O'Malley, and that's where our cheese factory used to stand. So we've got the old and the new. This is our boat launch down here, and it's a very busy place, partly because it's free, but there is wonderful fishing on that water. Okay. And this is our lending library. It's used a lot, and the beautification committee and their assistants keep it filled with flowers in the summer. And it's an added attraction to where our community hall used to sit. On the right is our community hall getting moved, and the mailboxes are there now, plus the lending library. And this is a picture of a crowd that was in the hall once, I guess, at a National Film Board showing. And this is Pappy Dowdler, a mailman. This was W.T. James that had all of Hereford cows, prize cows worldwide. this is Everett done again. They lived in Ottawa and cottaged at Appleton on the weekends, and that's when they rented their boats. Then they moved to Appleton. They did move up to Fee's Farm and lived there for some time. Then they moved down into the village. The house has been torn down now. A new one has been erected, but it was called Bayview. Bayview Lodge was a hotel that used to be in there, and Mr. Dunn has made it into a home, and a lot of his family were raised there, and they all worked in the mill. He had a big garden, and every fall he would take savory and wrap it up, and he put it at each doorway and in the village, and you had your little treat. Okay, can I go back to, okay. I said before that Everett and Cecil were twins, and the time of one of the big fires, we all had to stay at home and look after our own place because the cinders were coming onto your own roof and whatnot. And Everett was the boiler man at Colley's, and I don't know what his brother did, but he worked there. But Mr. Colley said to the two men, don't allow anyone down into the mill. I don't want anyone getting hurt at this fire. We have enough going on as it is. So sure enough, along came someone from the Ottawa Journal, and Everett was on the entrance way into the mill. And he said, no, you can't go in there. He said, Mr. Colley has orders. No one going in. We're afraid of injury. So the journalman thought, oh, I'll beat him. And he crossed the bridge and went to the dam on the other side and met Everett's twin Cecil. And when he said, how the hell did you get here so quick? Anyhow, the two guys had a great chuckle over that. So they were great men for the village. This was Herb Sneddon, and he did live in the big Sneddon farmhouse for a while. And while there, he built this garage. He sold case tractors and farm machinery, and what is now Sneddon Drive and all those homes. That was all the land he used to demonstrate the machinery on. He was very, very kind to us village children until he got married, and things changed drastically. We didn't get free ice cream cones and whatnot, but he really supported the village. He was very good to us, and he would often go to council and request things that the village needed and would stand firm. This is one of the days of the fire, and the men are carrying out the rolls of cloth. And they have a storage shed to put them in. And this is in the day when Malik Karsh came, and he had the men pretend that they were all heading home for lunch, but there's quite a few men in there that maybe there's a couple of those men that are still living. I know that's my father back in the corner, back in there. Okay, and this is the ladies working in the mill, and that is called burling. And when the cloth was all ready to almost get ready to be rolled up, any little flaws that were in it, these ladies went through it and repaired it so that it was immaculate when it was rolled up and sold. And this is Edith Dowdle, the sister of Lenny Spinks. Okay. This is Leonard Dowdle. He drove the bus for Collies. It would go into Carleton Place and Elmont and pick up the men to come to work, and they'd come to the mill and pick them up and take them home again. Angus O'Keefe was another one who operated the bus, and again, those men watched for us if we were out walking to the theater. They were very good to us. And this is the birthday card I said that my brother got from Donald Caldwell on his first birthday. And in years to come, I had the big honor of having 5 acres donated in my honor because of things I had done for the village, or so they thought. And anyhow, the council approved the 5 acres and they named it after me. And Jimmy Lowry was on council, and he was very proud to be able to unveil the plaque. And he really supported Appleton on the council when he was there. He was our mouthpiece and was very good. And this little girl presented me with flowers. And down on our dam, we do have some plaques honoring people that did things in the village. And that was one place we hoped where they wouldn't get damaged, but it's a good memory to keep them alive. And they were the ones whose names are up there were very active in the village. And that's down on the dam facing Miss Stewart's house. Okay.
Well, that is all of the pictures that we had today to go through, Eleanor. So thank you so much. I've been getting a lot of people sharing some of their own stories about Appleton in the chat, which is really nice to hear. And a lot of people just thanking you for telling your stories today. They really are so interesting in Appleton. It's such a beautiful village. It's such an interesting history. And so it's really great to get a really personal perspective about the history of the village. So thank you so much for that.
I'm honored to be asked to do it. And I sure enjoyed living here. I do. It was really my memories. It really wasn't a history, but I had such good memories.
I think it's nice to remember the personal memories. It really brings history to life, and it is important to remember them. Eleanor, I'd like to thank you so much for being here with us and doing this with us. I know there were a few last minute changes that we were able to work around, but on behalf of the Historical Society as well, we just really wanted to thank you. And I have a card and some flowers for you just off camera over here that we're really happy to present with you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You've been such a help to me.
I was happy to help, and great to hear the stories.
I thought, well, this time next year, I'll be lucky if I have a memory.
So thank you all so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do some more online speaker series again in the future. It's nice to get people from across Canada as far as Calgary and who knows where else. So I know we have Nancy in the East Coast, so thank you so much again, and we really appreciate it.